Hmm? Ah!
You're listening to the Run for Your Lives podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And this is the Run for Your Lives podcast.
This episode is the post-apocalyptic horror film 28 Days Later, directed by Danny Boyle and released June 27th, 2003, US, also released in 2002 for the UK, because I got stuff about that. But yeah, US release, because we go by that most of the time here, because that's what we are. That's who we are.
That's where we are. It's where we live. Yeah, it's funny. We had to wait. And I'm so impatient as it is that I'm sure I was impatient about this one. Yeah. I do love Danny Boyle. He's had some true masterpiece films, such as Trainspotting, which is one of my favorites. Such a great one. Ewan McGregor. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And then also, not just the director, but also the writer of this movie, Alex Garland. I had to point that out because I'm a big Alex Garland fan, because he also wrote and directed two movies that I enjoy quite a bit, which would be Ex Machina and Annihilation, which we should cover Annihilation for sure. It's a loose fit, but we do whatever we want, so I really want to talk about it. I need a good excuse to like dive into that movie again.
Okay. I'll add it to the list. I have seen that one. It's been a while, but I have seen that one.
Yeah, Ex Machina, I can't justify it fitting into this podcast necessarily, but it's still very good.
You know, I haven't seen that one.
You should check it out for sure.
You know what? It's going to be one of those things that you're just going to have to keep reminding me about, like Parks and Rec, and then I finally start watching. And I wonder why I never did it earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just how it goes. So this film features scenes set in normally bustling parts of London, such as Westminster Bridge, Piccadilly Circus, Horse Guards Parade, and Oxford Street.
Funny enough, yeah, they're usually like bustling areas, and in sometimes they still were. There's a lot of sneaky CGI where they actually had to take out full traffic of cars driving on like highways and stuff to make it look empty, because you can't shut off an entire like expressway for filming. So they would just pan over this road with full traffic and cars going on it, and then they'd have to digitally remove all of the cars for the final shot.
That's very clever. So it did receive the 2003 Saturn Award for Best Horror Film. The budget was $8 million. It grossed $84.6 million at the box office. Was 113 minutes long. Pake, bring us a synopsis.
All right. 4 weeks after, also known as 28 Days Later, after a mysterious incurable virus spreads throughout the UK, a handful of survivors try to find sanctuary.
Wow. Yeah, that kind of sums it up. This movie has been a bone of contention within some friend groups, just basically about what it actually is.
I'm not gonna talk about that too much, but yes, we'll do what we usually do. We'll talk about characters. We'll talk about kind of arcs and stories. Of course, part of that is the infected that I want to talk about. And yes, the infected in this movie are people taken over by a virus of sheer rage. They're not dead, undead. So don't use the Z word, or we will hear all kinds of sounds of rage emanating from the greater Philadelphia area. So we'll just keep it... We'll keep it friendly.
Yes, we have to.
It's infected. because I don't want to give a dear friend an aneurysm.
No, please don't.
Even if he doesn't listen to this, just knowing that we're doing it will kill him, so we can't do it.
I know. And I guess there's been some episode of The Cast of Us where they have this long, drawn-out discussion about, is it or isn't it? And I haven't listened to that one because I have my own opinion and I don't really plan to change it. So
Right.
I believe I'm right, and we're just going to leave it at that.
That's all that matters. Oh, all right. But yeah, this is a great movie. It is a classic movie in the post-apocalyptic genre. The bloodthirsty, mind-taken over creatures of whatever origin movies.
I know. What is that genre called? I mean, I know what I call it, but
Yeah.
I don't. I know we have two friends in particular that do live in that area of Philadelphia that both agree with it being what it is to them. But what do you call it?
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, if it's not that I can't give it a genre, but I will refer to them as infected.
That sounds perfect.
Throughout the notes. But we've got plenty to get to before just talking about infected, of course, as we do with characters. I've got separate sections for certain characters. Other characters that are like main characters in this movie, I don't have a lot of or any thoughts of specifically just to separate them, because this is one of those movies where we really follow one main character and then throw in the people he meets along the way, right?
That's for sure.
But we'll go ahead and start with Jim, who is that main character I was talking about that we really follow. We do have a opening of this movie, which is more infected stuff, which I'll talk about later when we get to those. But yeah, after those events occur, then 28 days later, Jim, wakes up from a coma in a hospital, realizing he's completely alone. It might seem very similar because it absolutely is. I did a little digging, though. However, according to Robert Kirkman, creator and writer of The Walking Dead, this was completely coincidental. He says he did not see this movie until after he had already finished the first chapter of The Walking Dead comics. This film was released a year prior to the first issue being published. So people still have an argument of but really though? You can't really prove it. But according to Kirkman, he was not aware of this until he had already finished the first chapter of The Walking Dead and then saw this movie and decided, people won't notice that much. And in a narrator voice, and people did notice a lot.
Yeah, there are some tie-ins to a few things in this movie.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I mean, I like little Easter eggs like that, whether they are intentional or not. It's a lot of fun. There was also Jim waking up in the hospital, reminding me a little bit of when Alice woke up in Resident Evil, even though she wasn't in a hospital, like at the start of the film. I can't continue without saying the following statement. We saw a lot of Cillian Murphy in this movie and all that he had to offer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I have a note about that. So we get to see a young Cillian with his full Murphy on display.
That I forgot about.
Yeah,
and...
he's not Rick Grimes. He's Dick Grimes.
You get to see it all, front and back.
Yeah. Just let it all hang out there, Cillian. It's fine. He does don a pair of scrubs pretty quickly, so
he does.
Move on from that. But it's funny. Yeah. You managed to forget about that?
I did. I found it interesting too, as we were just talking about. He has the key to get out of the hospital room, and it's just okay, someone has locked him in, someone's protecting him. Why, who, what, when, I don't know what's going on, but he's locked in there.
Yeah. No idea what's going on as he's trying to escape. Stops by the opened, looted soda machines. New to the apocalypse, grab a Pepsi.
That's their slogan.
Yeah. But yeah, not only is the hospital completely abandoned, but then as we see as he heads out into the world, that the entirety of London seems to be completely empty. It's not, but it is. And they never really talk about it specifically, only kind of context clues. But for some reason, the infected can go outside during the day. They just don't. Very often. They prefer the shadows. They prefer the nighttime. They prefer the darker areas. There's no reason given. There's no explanation or exposition, but it's safer to move during the day, and they're not out as much. They can be, but they're not.
Peg, I don't think they have enough sunscreen. I think they're trying to be safe. And they don't have enough sunscreen.
Nothing makes them rage more than melanoma.
Yep.
So
and I thought at this one point when Jim was screaming, "Hello, hello, hello," I just kept thinking what we always think when people yell, when they don't really know what's going on. It's a very bad idea.
Yes. Hello, are you my echo? Yeah, but he does find people? Question mark. Not too long. He said, I love when he goes into the church. He's headed up the stairs. The graffiti, the big writing on the wall. Repent. The end is extremely fucking nigh. I love it.
In a church, no less.
Yeah. But yeah, this whole thing's going to be just incredibly jarring and confusing for him. He does find tons of bodies in the church and a few, again, people, question mark, who are alive inside, but fully rage infected, acting a whole lot like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. That word.
Definitely. I thought it was funny when he was collecting money on the steps because, of course, we all know what's going on, but he has no idea.
Ooh, money.
And he's a bike.
This lying around.
And we learned that he's a bike messenger, so, you got to figure he's probably not making a ton of money. Mm-hmm. He ended up in the hospital because he was hit. So, he's been out of it for a couple of weeks. 4 to be exact. Mm-hmm. So he really has no idea, what's happened. But it also gives you this clue that shit really hit the fan in 28 days.
Yeah.
It was a very quick spread.
Long. Yeah. It was very fast. But yeah, these infected that he runs into in the church take off after him, so he's running from murderous monsters. When he does get saved and taken in by a couple of strangers who seem to know what they're doing pretty well with Molotovs and explosions and all of that. And that is this solace is taken in the form of Mark and Selena, who break the news to him about the state of the world. And even with that, he still has to know for sure. He still wants to go check on his family, on his parents. So they do go with him the next day. Again, we don't go out at night, but during the day it's safe enough, reasonably, as long as you're not by yourself, if you got backup. But they let him know to prepare for the worst, which he does, and yeah, they're telling him to be grateful that they went out the way they did. Seems they just kind of took a handful of pills and a bottle of wine and slept. Because that's even the note that they have is, Jim, with endless love, we left you sleeping. Now we're sleeping with you. Don't wake up. Which is a little exposition-y that they would write that on the photo. But it's emotional and meaningful enough, so I'll go with it.
Yeah. I thought that Selena and Mark were a bit brutal with him, and I think part of it's because they've had the time to realize what's going on. They've dealt with the things that are going on, and it's made them a bit, they're more pessimistic and just not...
what they've experienced.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying, is they say he should be grateful that they went out the way they did, because Mark is telling the story of watching his father just turn and become this rage monster right there in front of his eyes. And he's like, at least you didn't have to see that.
And I think seeing his family laying on the bed together, his mother and father holding the picture of him, I think, that I think is maybe some solace, just because, when they died, they were thinking of you. They were, thinking of the family. That was what was on their minds. And, they weren't infected. It was just simply they did this because, they didn't know what else to do.
Yeah. And they stay the night there at Jim's parents' place. There's really interesting, kind of take the veer off of character discussion for a little bit, just movie production stuff. There's a lot of really interesting choices in editing and shots where they blend screens, like even before they head to the house. Like, Mark is talking, but then you see Selena also in like the other like bottom of the screen, like where she's definitely sitting across from him, but it's showing both their faces anyway. Or, they're staying there at night and like it shows Mark sleeping, but it also shows like the window. Like it's there's like separate, like two different shots happening at the same time. Like there's like a lot of like weird effects when they're driving later. I'm jumping way ahead, but like because this is Frank at this point driving in the taxi. But like they're driving past this field of flowers, and the flowers all look hand painted. Like there's just like certain effects and editing and shots that are just artistic with no real other reason for them, but it gives this movie a very unique feel.
I agree. And I like that. I like that it helps it stand out. It's very much an individualistic, I think, approach.
Right. Or even like with Jim watching, because I'm segueing right back in. With Jim watching this like home video kind of thing where what's happening in the home video he's watching is not what we're seeing. He's just like reliving like, oh, memories of mom. But then it puts himself in this like normal breakfast morning routine where he's having a conversation because he's still wearing the scrubs. And his parents are talking to him. So it's like, that's not what's on the video or thing he's watching, but it's showing that like he's in his own place in his head, reliving memories, still holding on to these things of his parents.
Yeah. If you think about it, he's like any responsible child that wants to go check on family members, whether it's parents, brothers, sisters. You just know when he's going up the stairs to even just look in the room that it's going to end bad because of the smell, and you can tell that he's overtaken, and you just realize that he's a good guy, and he's just one of so many that had this tragic, situation where you come home to family members who have died, or, like Mark, you lose someone, and see them turn right in front of you. And it's really tragic because it leaves people broken. And that's what we get a lot with, Mark and Selena. And Jim is now being brought into this world. And you can tell through the conversations, even though Mark is talking to him about what happened to him and his family, it's still hard for Jim to process all of this because he just can't imagine how this could have happened because he wasn't awake for any of the pieces leading into it.
Right. They said he was just doing his job. He was making a delivery. He was on his bike. Something happened. He got hit, knocked off the bike. His head hit the pavement, and he woke up in the hospital with nobody there. Like it's that immediate for him. So it's just it's a shock for sure.
I know at one point he has a newspaper. He looks at a newspaper and it says evacuation. But that's still not enough to give him what he needs to understand about what's going on. And the more they talk about it with him, he still isn't accepting it because it's just too large of a thing to believe.
Right. Just kind of have to assimilate to it over time as he does. But it's a lot to just like, okay, that's where we're at now. Let me move forward with that. No, he's trying to function with it the whole time. But yeah, so back to this, he's watching this video and he's holding this candle, and it's just like the little TV, but it's really even just like the candlelight, those little things. Beckons on a couple of infected neighbors, comes smashing through the window, and it's hard to believe that Jim survived without any blood getting mixed in with anything. You know, as we see, like, it's just as simple as like a cut-to-cut blood transmission. And so the fact that he didn't get infected in that moment is crazy, but he does survive. Mark, on the other hand, not so lucky. Selena quickly puts him out of his misery before he's even in it.
This is the second time that Jim really witnesses the seriousness of the situation, because Selena, unfortunately, without even giving Mark time to speak, really takes Mark out immediately.
Mm-hmm.
There's no chopping off of any limbs like we've seen in other things. She just completely chops him up and makes sure he's dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she even then says to Jim, like, you know, she's like, how'd you know he's infected? He's like, I didn't, but he knew he was. I could tell by looking at him. And she's like, you can't hesitate. You can't. In this world we're in now. And that's where she says to him, you know, given the opportunity, if something happens to you, I will do the same to you in a heartbeat. Which I love that comes back. That's a big theme. But yeah.
Yeah.
So they're back out on their own, and then they see some blinking Christmas lights up in a flat somewhere, so go to check it out. And then while Selena is taking Jim's drink order on the stairs, they learn that they're not the only ones interested in the lights, because a couple of infected come into the building. And as they're running up the stairs from those, that's where we meet the characters of Frank and Hannah. We first see Frank as, honestly, just this badass. He's got some riot gear equipment and this big old shield and like mask and stuff covering his face, trying to cover up his like skin and body the most he can. And then Hannah, his daughter, who eventually lets the two in after her father says that she can. But yeah, they're now seeing new people who become a big part of this movie. In fact, to where I'm going to skip over so many important things in this movie because I really want to more attribute it to those characters. So I'm sticking with Jim.
So before we do, though, where have we seen Frank before?
Oh man, Brendan Gleeson. I will say I'll go into one of my notes about Frank. And the fact that this makes me feel kind of old, a little bit. I mean, this movie's been out 20 years.
It has.
Because I remember seeing it the time that it came around. Brendan Gleeson is all like unrecognizable as Frank. He's aged a lot. I mean, he's almost 70 now, so he still looks great, but it was like he's definitely much older now than when this movie came out. To where it's like when you first see him in that flat when they come up there, you're like, that's not Brendan Gleeson. He's much older man.
It is Brendan Gleeson, and we do remember him actually as the wonderful Sheriff Hank Keogh from Lake Placid.
Mm-hmm.
And some others may remember him for his little-known role in the movie Braveheart, which is where I first saw him.
Yeah. See, my most recent thing with him is The Banshees of Inisherin, where he was nominated for an Oscar for, like, supporting actor and stuff there. So, yeah. Then he definitely... Because that was like this last year, so he's definitely looking a lot more aged.
Yes, he is. But I loved his character because he was a bit badass. But we're not going to talk too much about Frank right now. I just wanted to point out that he was someone that we've seen before.
Yeah. And
it's good to have him back in the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I always like seeing him. So I said I was going to skip over a lot of stuff that they do with Frank and Hannah because I wanted to talk more about them. But on their road trip, let's say there's a tunnel involved, there's a grocery shopping trip involved. We'll get to those. But eventually they have a nice little picnic in the grass featuring still moist raisins, vitamin C, and a family of wild horses for viewing, right?
So beautiful, though.
Maybe,
oh, man.
Maybe then the first signs of a little romance brewing for Jim and Selena. Even though she said, what do you think, we're going to just, like, fall in love and stuff? And then she was being very, like, kind of snarky about it at first. But then, now that they have been together, I think she's immediately going, oh, shit, he's actually kind of a really, like, good-looking, charming, good guy, and fine.
Well, they had that earlier conversation where, you know, as we talked about, being a good person and whether or not the person will slow you down, where Jim is more focused on, if a person is a good person, you should try to help them and try to help them survive. And Selena's like, well, it doesn't matter if they're a good person or not, because you may have to leave them behind if they're holding you back, because survival is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And I think she's starting to understand him a little bit better. And she even kisses him on the cheek.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't like this, oh my God, we're going to have a humping session in the middle of the grass. So I was happy for that.
Slow burn. Even the way at the end of the movie, it's still very much just kind of like ambiguous. You don't really know, and that's fine. But yeah, so this little picnic and drugs for dessert to help with the sleeping, of course. And Jim sleeps really good, aside from the nightmare of being all alone again, and maybe joining a different movie in the form of Black Sheep, if that dream would have kept going. Who knows if he would have been woken up, what would have happened with that quickly moving herd of sheep.
Yeah, I don't know if that was intended. I don't think it could be. Wait, when did Black Sheep come out?
It was 2006, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pulling it out of like nowhere, out of thin air, but I feel like that's
I'm
what came to my brain.
2006. Okay, yeah.
I nailed it. How did I know that? I'm getting good at things.
No, you know what? You know it because we covered so much shit, and it just continues to accumulate inside your brain. It's wonderful.
But yeah, so who knows what those sheep would have come. But he sleeps right through breakfast and everything, which clearly he needed it. He needed the rest. He's been through a lot since he woke up in that hospital. They continue on, again, skipping over a lot of important stuff because they were on a mission to get somewhere. And guess what? They got somewhere, but then things happened.
Stuff and things
happen at that place. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But eventually the survivors are taken by soldiers at this place they get to a big country manor with hot showers and food and shelter. And we, see where our survivors, which, spoiler but not really spoiler because you're listening to this if you've watched the movie, with Frank dead, our survivors are, we have hopeless Selena, grieving Hannah, more nude Jim. So, we're all good. Covered. Yes. Bases covered.
More nude Jim is like a bad name, right?
Maybe. I don't know. Killian's Murphy. Just like Good Omens, the new season of Good Omens. I've only watched the first episode so far, season 2 of Good Omens, but there is a nude John Hamm in that first episode. He's walking through the streets with nothing on, and he's just holding a box in front of him, and then when you get the behind shot, I was like, oh, look, it's John Hamm's John Hamm's. But yeah. And yeah, it's funny I'm like skipping over things, but I'm just talking about Jim. Again, we can talk about the reason they got there is they hear the radio telling them this is a safe place to be. They get there, and
Did
these soldiers.
Did that sound familiar to you?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Salvation, sanctuary for all.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Very much.
Those who arrive survive. Oh no.
Very much reminiscent of Terminus.
Mm-hmm.
It just made me think of
yeah. Except these soldiers aren't interested in eating the people that show up.
Oh, no.
Maybe something different, though. As we find out, it really was. There's the answer to infection, as Major West says. Well, the answer is we're just going to hide out and wait and see if it dies out on its own, and we'll start new from there. And if we can get some women up in this place, that's what we're going to try to do. For our own pleasure, but no, for the future. It's for the future. That's what it is. There's no future without women, and I promised my soldiers a future. Yeah, we know what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure Jim believed that this was going to be a haven anyway. I think he was skeptical from the beginning.
Yeah. Of course, once he realizes what's going on, he tries to get the women, or he tries to get Selena and Hannah out of there, which does not go well. The only other soldier who objects to the women being used as objects, same word, same spelling, two different meanings.
Sergeant Farrell, yeah.
Yes, was Farrell, who then ends up just in a dungeon, kind of area, locked up right there with Jim. Where, he's going on and on about, how his fellow soldiers are just awful and he can't believe the things that they're doing. And then he goes into this kind of theory about how the rest of the world is actually still going on as normal, and they just quarantined and gave up on the UK because it's an island and nobody can get off or on without certain, reasons. So let's just keep all the infected right there on this, and then just let them all out, and just like, who, okay?
I know, and I'm just like, do you really think that is what would be going on? I don't.
We don't know. Because, Jim and Farrell are taken out kind of by a firing squad of Mitchell and Jones, where we learn that Jim is very resourceful and very smart when they're taken out to the woods for execution. Mitchell and Jones are arguing about the sadistic side of Mitchell after Farrell gets shot, and Jim kind of runs off, but then lays down in a pile of bodies, which leaves the soldiers to run off after him, and then he's like, nope, still here, and then goes the other way. It was very brilliant.
It was. But you got to see all of the bodies that were out there, so you have to know that this isn't the first time that they've done something like this.
Well, it's very up in the air. It's kind of ambiguous, because earlier we have Major West saying to Mitchell to go clear the field of bodies. So are these just infected that they've cleared and piled up somewhere? Or are these other people who have shown up hearing the call, and they weren't the people they were looking for, so or they didn't get along with, so it's not really answered. It could be one or the other.
Well,
but given who these soldiers are...
Look at the cars that were at that checkpoint.
True. Yeah.
So I have to think that maybe some of the folks that they brought in for Sanctuary weren't down to join the gang. Because he did West gave Jim the option of joining him.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't. Because he's a good guy.
Right.
But he also knows he has to do something, because even though it's been a very short period of time, Jim believes in taking care of people. He would not leave Hannah and Selena there, because he knows what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So after he escapes Mitchell and Jones, goes over the fence, but we see he falls down on the ground, and then while he's looking up, there is a plane flying overhead. Was Farrell right?
Mm-hmm.
Could he have been onto something?
Yeah.
There are other people capable of... to what extent is the U.S. functioning as normal with, no infected here? We don't get those answers right here now. Anyway, we don't know.
No, we don't.
But there is definitely more civilization out there. The world isn't what Selena thinks as all fucked, right?
Mm-hmm.
That somebody's out there with enough capability to be flying planes overhead. There's a system you know?
Yeah.
Flight patterns are being monitored to some degree.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely, I think he would have gone back for the girls anyway.
Absolutely.
But it definitely triggers something in him to be like, there's hope. I'm not just going back to help them, but I'm going back to the idea that we could find a way to a future after this.
Exactly.
Yeah, so then he goes back to the blockade, sounds off that air raid siren, which alerts West and some other soldiers, but alerts some other things as well, which is his plan.
He's got lots of great ideas.
Yeah. He's kind of taking the Chris Pratt and Jurassic World approach, right? Where he's like, I just take the raptors in with us, right? And to target the enemy.
They'll take care of the situation.
Right. So he's just going to lead the infected right there. Because then even when he goes back to the house, he frees Mailer, the infected that they have back there, lets him into the house, and he's just like, all right, cause chaos, and then get Selena and Hannah out in the midst of it.
Exactly.
Jones is able to hide and escape from the infected, but he then just runs directly into Jim's bayonet, which then we see the Jim McClane here. What a special ops badass that Jim has become in this house.
He was very determined. He had a mission. He was carrying out the mission, and he was successful. I mean, he knew what he needed to do, and he made sure it happened.
Right. And then we get the scene of him killing Mitchell, which, wow, just an incredible scene, because Jim has rage of his own. It's not a virus. It's real, organic, justified rage. And he lets it rip, right? And then Selena grabs the machete, ready to use it if he's infected, mirroring that scene with Mark early on that we talked about. She said she'd do the same to Jim in a heartbeat, and that was longer than a heartbeat.
It was. Like, no, Selena, don't hurt him. He came to save you. He's your knight in shining armor. Come on.
Which, this whole sequence happens to this music that's playing, this piece of music that is titled In the House in a Heartbeat, which obviously very much named for the scene and the theme going on. They are in the house. He's going through the house, having people killed, and then the In a Heartbeat thematic line coming back, which is one of my favorite pieces of music.
It is.
There are very few select instrumental pieces from movies and TV shows that have made my Spotify playlist. This is one of them.
Oh, it's so incredible. John Murphy did this score.
Mm-hmm.
It has been used in other films and in advertising campaigns. And every time I hear it, I'm just like 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
Because it takes me back to this scene.
Yeah. It's great. And they do escape, thanks to Hannah, which I'll talk about later.
Good old Hannah.
But yeah, at the end of the movie, once again, Jim's waking up in a bed. But this time, instead of the hospital, it is a quaint little cottage with his newfound family. And they've put together all of the cloth that they can find in order to signal a jet flying overhead with a big hello. His signature word there. He says it a lot. Every time he was going into different places while he was in the hospital waking up that first time, it's hello? Hello? So,
carefully included within that hello message are the dresses that Hannah and Selena were forced to wear.
Yes.
Even though...
The blue curtains.
The blue curtains. Jim was so nice. You know, he was complimentary about her wearing the dress, though.
Mm-hmm.
He did say that, but still.
That thing's tied to some, drama. Let's get rid of it.
Let's get rid of it. It needs to go.
Yeah. Which I like, before they finish that last piece, the O, with the red and stuff from the dresses in it, we do get, a very quick glimpse, because you don't know exactly what's happening, because it's the car crashing through the gate, and then there's like a little glimpse of like he actually could have died from that like from them crashing through. He took some head trauma, and they had to kind of resuscitate him and medicate him and like nurse him back to health again a little bit. And so like during those sequences, which are very like chaotic and intense and sporadic, we see that unfinished note for the plane sitting out there, and the O is not there yet, so it just says hell, and then it moves on, and it kind of leaves you going like, what is happening? And then it all kind of comes around, and you're like, okay, good. This is a happy ending.
As happy as you can be in an apocalypse.
Yes.
One thing we didn't talk about was some Major Henry West, the big baddie.
Christopher Eccleston.
I know everyone remembers him as like the first Doctor in the once Doctor Who kind of came back. I've
never jumped into Doctor Who still. To me, he's in MCU. He's Malekith. That's
okay.
That's where I go to with him.
For me, he's a character named Claude from Heroes, and his character was one that could go invisible. In one episode, he went invisible, and we never saw him again. Oh. I was like, but he's quite a bit younger in this film.
As everyone is.
As everyone is,
that's how time works, but also, like, clearly it's been enough time that you can see how much younger they are going back and watching this now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, Cillian Murphy, I mean, he's, like, almost 50 now. And,
he is.
I mean, what's his big deal going on right now? Oppenheimer?
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's what got me thinking about doing this movie. Is because it's such a big deal right now with him doing Oppenheimer, and it's getting so much acclaim. I haven't seen it yet, so I can't say. But there's a lot of Oscar buzz already for it, which is cool. We also have Naomi Harris, who plays Selena. She, of course, has gone on to, she's gone on to something pretty big. It's, she has something to do with our good friend James Bond now.
Yeah, so it's a really cool cast. It really was.
Yeah.
Man, so I'm good on Jim. Again, I know I will have to go back and cover some very important parts. I have a lot to say about the father-daughter duo of Frank and Hannah. So we can either go there, or if you have notes about Selena. Again, unfortunately, I don't really have any notes about her specifically. Everything was kind of tied into her other storylines with Jim or the soldiers, which I'll get to, and things like that.
What I think with Selena is, I think in the beginning we see someone who's just very much, she's resigned to the fact of this is how life is and survival is the most important thing. And then by the end, you can see that she's transitioned to this feeling of hope, and she's got this affection for Jim. At one point, she does kiss him. On the lips, not just the cheek.
Right. And then Hannah comes in and bashes him in the head because I thought he was biting you.
No. He was not. So you can appreciate there's a little bit of of affection there. And I was thinking about that. They haven't known each other very long. But if you think about the situation, life during this apocalypse can end very quickly. So if you feel a certain way, you basically, I think, have to run with it very fast because you don't know if you'll have the opportunity to tell the person or, feel what you feel with them, because they could be dead or you could be dead tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I did appreciate her resourcefulness when it came to Hannah, supporting her, and also the situation at the house and using some of that, chemist drugs that she had to try to help with the situation. I think she also was very good with the machete.
Yeah.
But I think that we should probably move on and talk about Frank and Hannah, because some of the big parts of the movie involved Hannah. So, yeah. Let's go back and
so we talked
that.
Brendan Gleeson a little bit. That was kind of my first note there. But then we also see, they've got this set up in this, flat where they've lived. Clearly they have lost Frank's wife, Hannah's mother, at some point. And it's just, they're growing kind of desperate. I mean, the water doesn't work. There's no running water. They're running low on food. They're running low on supplies. And Frank has picked up this reading from Major West, is actually the voice on the radio, promising them, yes, this safety and security and answer to the infection, as he says. And it's all they have to go on, as, Hannah says, we just stay here and die versus go out there and risk it. But at least there's something to look forward to versus just staying here and giving up. And I mean, they've done what they can. You see that Frank has tons of pots and pans and buckets of all kinds all over the roof of the building to collect rainwater, which just isn't happening. I love that line from him. He says, you'd never think it needing rain so badly. Not in fucking England.
Yeah, no, it's always thinking about, London fog and rain and just it being dreary. So you don't think of it as being a place that doesn't rain. You don't think of it being basically dry.
Mm-hmm. It's the Seattle of Europe, right?
Evidently, yes. I think so. The one time I was in Seattle, it did rain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I still haven't been to Seattle. It's on the bucket list. I've got reasons to go. Several reasons to go. So I need to do it, but it'll happen. Eventually. But yeah, Selena's wanting to leave and move on from Frank's, but then again, with the recording, Frank lets them in and says, we need some extra people to make this journey. One, just for Hannah, because if it's just the two of us and something happens to me, I don't want to leave her alone. But also just having the extra hands, the extra help. Frank was a taxi driver, so he's got this taxi loaded up with snacks. Time for a road trip. Woo! What's on the playlist in the car? Cranberries, Rage Against the Machine, the Blood Brothers.
This soundtrack, let's just talk about it. It's pretty fantastic.
Yes. What, the one that I just came up with, or the actual soundtrack to this movie?
The one that you just came up with.
Oh, yeah. That's good. But also, I adore the music of this movie. Not just In the House in a Heartbeat, but just the whole score and soundtrack of this movie is so good.
It's so perfect for what's going on in every scene. It pulls you in. It's not something that disconnects you. I know in some films, we've always talked about music being in character. And I think that's the case in this movie. I think it builds. It's a piece of the scenery.
Yeah. But yeah, so the taxi, they're trying to leave London, and their way out, they decide, we can try to go around, take a long way, or we can cut through this easy way, just through this tunnel, and we're good. And they decide that they definitely shouldn't go through the tunnel. It's a really bad idea. So then they immediately go through the tunnel.
Of course.
Luckily, all of the wrecked cars in that tunnel form a perfectly functional ramp system. So maybe it is a good idea? No, because now the tires are fucked. Bad idea. Still bad idea. However, we learn that Hannah, after this is all over, if the world is still going on as normal in the U.S., definitely needs to move to, Kentucky and get a job as on a NASCAR pit crew.
Yes, please.
That is some quick jack work.
She is amazing. You have to think that Frank has taught her so much to prepare her for the world so that she doesn't need anyone else but herself.
Right.
She's able to change a tire in record time.
Yes. I mean, yeah, we got this whole slew of infected killers just barreling down on you, and she's like, zzz, zzz, zzz. She's doing the pit crew thing with just a regular, little bar. She doesn't even need the fancy equipment. She's on it. They go through, they make it through, they escape those infected, and then our team enjoys a little grocery shopping trip. Said candy, booze, all the goodies. Frank said, I'm going to pay with my card. Keep the change.
Though, I think they're very lucky that Frank is such a connoisseur of liquor, especially scotch, because he was not going to let Jim take the wrong kind of alcohol. He wanted the best. He wanted the best. Only the best.
Which makes sense. And then, I was talking about they're on their way to this little checkpoint that they've heard about. So the Snacksy, rolls up to its destination. They had a GPS. You have arrived at utter disappointment and devastation.
Too true.
Yeah, because there's nobody at the checkpoint at first, it seems, when they arrive. But there's no infected either, so, it's kind of quiet. No infected until Frank ends up with the worst stroke of bad luck imaginable and gets a drop of blood from a dead infected right in his eye. So then it doesn't take long for him to turn, and then a few of the soldiers appear out of nowhere and gun him down. It's a very sad scene, Frank's death. But I'll be honest, any time that this movie is mentioned, it is one of two visuals that come to my mind immediately. There's two things that, no matter how long it's been since I've seen this movie, whatever somebody says, 28 days later, my brain will play two images. One is the blood drip falling into Frank's eye. So, and...
And what is the other one, Pake?
Oh, it's nothing. I mean, it may or may not be naked Cillian Murphy. I can't confirm or deny that. Who knows? Anyway. That's why I said earlier, I was like, I'm surprised you forgot about that, because it's literally, when somebody says this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, the movie where we start with Cillian Murphy's full package.
It's just missing the bow. Ready for Christmas.
Right. So I was like, I'm surprised you forgot about that, because it's literally one of two images that pops into my head when I think of this movie.
That makes me wonder. No, actually, I don't. I'm just so much more intrigued by your brain, Pake.
It does interesting things sometimes.
It
I said, half the time there, or the other half, it's this Brendan Gleeson getting blood in his eye.
Okay.
So it's one or the other. It's
okay.
We're one end of the spectrum on where that my mind goes with this movie. Sad or intriguing.
Oh man.
But then back to the house. All the things that are going on there. Hannah is super high, as Selena gave her some pills to alter her mind in case of the worst. But now she's just transformed into the harbinger of death. She's just sitting there like, I don't think they're coming back. You're next. Very much like, why don't you come and play with me, Danny? No,
I know. She's
just
so
super creepy.
She is. But I liked it. I liked that she was like that. I'm like, okay, you go, Hannah.
Right. And like I said, harbinger of death, because as she's saying these things, Jones and the other soldiers are kind of freaking out, and then surprise, here's Mailer, and the infection party begins.
And one by one, they all succumb.
Yeah, in one way or another. But I will say, her in the bathroom, the scene where she's hiding behind the mirror from the one infected soldier.
Oh, man.
Oh, it's so freaking tense. It's so tense. Even knowing that she's going to be fine as I watch it, I'm like, I can't breathe during this scene.
Yeah. It's just so, if you look, you have to look at it two different ways. Look at it from her perspective, but also look at it from the person that's infected. Like, what do they actually remember when they're looking into that mirror? Mm-hmm. Like, they probably don't remember anything, but that's quite a moment, to be faced with your own reflection.
Yeah.
Is there any part of yourself that's still there?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And as they're leaving, Major West is waiting in the escape taxi and he shoots Jim, non-lethally, obviously, which maybe is another reason that they need to patch him up, not just the crash through the gate. But, Hannah takes off with Major West in the backseat of the car, backs him up into the building, DoorDash delivery for Mailer. And and then picks up the other two and rolls out. And I'm thinking, should we be letting the child who's stoned be driving the car? I guess we're gonna.
Yes.
So
I think she should. Because you know what? The apocalypse sucks for teenagers.
Right.
This is all they get. This is the only fun they have.
Mm-hmm. Sure, let the stoned kid drive. And she does, and barrels through the locked gate, and 28 days later.
28 days later, which is actually, 56 days after the initial infection. Which we didn't talk about yet.
Not yet. But, so we get to, like, the villain, the monster, the whatever, kind of at the end, so I have infection notes, but still got a few characters to talk about. Do you have any more on Frank and Hannah? Or the only characters I have left is just kind of the soldiers as a whole would be my last character section.
Oh, you mean the assholes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were not my favorite, other than Sergeant Farrell, because I think he knew what they were doing was wrong, but he still couldn't. I mean, there wasn't really anything he could do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was just forced to be part of the process until he wasn't anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can go on and talk some notes about them if we're ready.
Sure, I'm ready. I think I'm ready to go for that.
Yeah, and I've talked about some of them. Like I said, this answer to infection, which is a big promise. At first, I'm like, well, the answer is, sorry, you're screwed. But then Jim learns what the answer was. Again, I talked about that.
Yeah.
But this place is highly secured. They're trying to rebuild. And there should be some red flags. They're like, we're rebuilding. But the only thing there is soldiers. And all men. And one infected.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
So what are you rebuilding with? Well, we learned the plan, the idea. And as apocalyptic this whole movie feels and is, it is kind of mind-blowing at the dinner scene where the Major reminds us that it has only been a month since the first infection started.
I had in my notes, if you look at this situation, it did not take long for things to go to hell.
Right. Not at all.
Whether or not it was a ripple effect from ground zero or not, it took no time for this to spread throughout the country and leave London basically empty.
Yeah. So yeah, I said it's highly secured, like the tripwires and landmines and all this stuff. Like if it wasn't for it being run by just total creeps and awful people, this is an incredible place and quite the sanctuary, really. I kind of love that Jones is still wearing his frilly pink apron when the tripwire goes off and he grabs his gun and takes off running. But yeah, they're doing a good job gunning down all this infected swarm that's running in, and they're shoot them down. One of them bounces, double bomb, which was fun. Yeah, but then after that, they come back inside, and Mitchell is just a pig. He's the worst. I think Mitchell was the worst of all of them. Even the Major. Even though the Major kind of came up with this plan, it's no excuse. I'm not giving him any credit, but at least he's kind of apologetic about it. He's like, it is what it is. Mitchell is just awful all the way through.
Mitchell just expects.
Mm-hmm.
He feels he's entitled.
Right.
To all of this. To whatever woman he wants, where he wants them, whatever. He wants to take them off with him. It's so chauvinistic, and it's so, kind of narcissistic too. He thinks he's that good to deserve Hannah or Selena.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why I really liked Farrell again in that moment, because he's coming in and doing that, and then Mitchell starts tussling with Jim, and Farrell comes in and just gut punches him real good for being so crude and rude, and we see that he is standing up for Selena and for Jim in that moment.
Yeah,
this is not what we're supposed to become. This is not who we are.
No,
it is who Mitchell is, unfortunately, but.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I said, this place is not a good place. with the radio broadcast being just to lure women in, not just people, but women really, because they need, like I said, quote unquote, a future. And
if they have lured in more people, where are the women that they've lured in?
Right. I don't know. Have they been successful before this, or is it just really bad?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So, then I have a note that says, who's the soldier who lost a fight with an angry pair of clippers? And then we learn that is Davis.
Oh, my God. Something happened to that poor soldier.
Right.
What bet did he lose?
Oh, man.
For Patchy. I mean, I honestly wrote in my note, I called him Patchy.
Yeah, which, again, he's not too long, because he's one of the two. It's Major West and Davis who answer to Jim on the air raid siren, and Jim, again, that's where he starts his McClane shit.
Oh, man.
So when Major West gets back to the truck, yeah, no, Davis is as dead as the connection to the truck engine, so you better run, Major.
Exactly. So good. I love the comeuppance that happened at the end, where everyone basically got what their worst fear was, which was being infected.
Yeah.
It just made me so happy. It's like, you know what? This is what you didn't want. You were pretty rotten, awful people. And it just takes me back to the things that Jim said about, good people. And Jim knew that Selena and Hannah were good people. He wanted to protect them. He wanted to save them, even though they hadn't been together very long. I think, again, time in an apocalypse, you connect with people quickly and they become your surrogate family. You can't help it.
Mm-hmm. So that's notes I have on there. Just like infected stuff is all that's left for me.
There was one part I wanted to bring up. So I'm not quite sure where they were. I thought it was the grocery store, but Jim ends up killing a kid that's been infected.
I have notes about that. It's at a diner. They stopped. It's like this diner gas station to siphon gas from the trucks, like a truck stop.
Yes.
They needed gas, and Jim goes inside the diner part of it just to kind of look around. For being such a hateful, angry little boy, that kid was super quiet. At first, no cheeseburgers, just a bloodthirsty child.
Yes, and all Jim wanted was a cheeseburger.
He did. Instead, he got that. So as the kid is there right before he kills him off screen, we don't see. But yeah, then this little boy yells, "I hate you!" Which was really interesting, as it made me kind of do like a little rabbit hole deep dive on some of these things, because I was curious about that, because it's the only time in the movie that an infected speaks. Mm-hmm. Of course, the mouth on the kid doesn't match that when it happens, and it was just strange, so I had to look into it. But then I ended up kind of falling down this like rabbit hole about that kid and that scene. So it was an audio error that was made. It made its way into the final cut. Danny Boyle did not want any human vocalizations from the infected. Somehow that one slipped through. There's kind of a running theory that a lot of the snarls and growls and sounds that they make are actually, like, when they recorded them, that there is words that are said, and then they're, like, audio edited and
removed. Yeah.
Changed around to where, like, at the base level of the sounds being made is actual words and vocalizations, but then, like, just the rage garbles it up. And somehow this "I hate you" coming from this kid made it out crystal clear. For some reason.
It reminded me of a scene in the original Dawn of the Dead, where Fran and Peter and the others stop to refuel the helicopter. Yeah.
It has to be an homage in a way, because then they go inside, and what do they have is these two kids sitting in there. Yeah. So,
exactly.
No, totally. One more fun fact about Infected Diner Boy. It was played by the young actor Justin Hackney, who really, I could only find 3 credits because he does a lot of. He's older now, obviously, and now he does more stunt work and stunt coordination. So he's still in the film industry. But as far as like on-screen stuff that he's like credited for, not much. However, he did portray a crawler in the movie The Descent just a few years after this. Also filmed in the UK. And a fun little tie-in between his crawler in The Descent and his infected diner boy in 28 Days Later. Both of those characters jump up on a character's back, then are flung over the character's head and are killed with a blow to the head. So...
Is that on his resume as preferred way to die?
It's like, I'm really good at this very specific thing.
Oh, man.
So I thought that was fun.
That is an interesting rabbit hole that you went down with that.
Yes, all because of this kid saying, I hate you! And then I wound up, like, tell me everything on the internet about this kid. What's going on? Mm-hmm. But yeah, infected stuff. The opening of the movie we haven't talked about still really.
We have to talk about it.
So yeah, it's this group of activists who are attempting to free chimps from a lab, even with the warnings from a scientist who catches them in the lab that says that these chimps are infected with the rage virus, I guess, that they have. Again, there's a lot of things that are not explicitly explained. I'm assuming, was this rage virus created and then put into the chimps in order to test?
I think so.
X, Y, or Z. That's what I assume. But then also, he's like, you can't find the cure without the disease. So.
Right. To find the cure, we must first understand.
Yeah.
And so I think that they probably were infected. And I think with these activists, they're trying to do the right thing and their heart is in the right place. And to me, it was another example of how you can have the best of intentions, but if you truly don't understand the magnitude of the testing of what's going on, you can really fuck shit up.
Yeah, and that's what happens. Is this scientist is warning them like they're highly contagious. There's a rage virus. He calls it what it is right off the top, and still, like, one of the chimps is freed and immediately attacks and infects the woman who opened the cage, who turns quickly, infecting another, and I'm sure it was just a quick downhill roll from there, but cut straight to 28 days later.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, we know from that moment to Jim waking up in the hospital, it took less than a month. So...
It spread very, very quickly.
I'm trying to see if I have any other notes, because a lot of the stuff was like that weird rabbit hole about the diner kid. I liked the effect of when they're running up the stairs when we meet Frank and Hannah, and Frank knocks one of the infected that's chasing them like down the middle of the stairwell, like hole, like between, and he's like bouncing around rail to rail. That was cool. I really liked.
I liked some of the gags. I think that there were some clever gags at that point, but also with all of the mess that was going on at the compound. I thought it was really cool. Things looked realistic. There wasn't a lot of, that doesn't work, or, oh, that doesn't look right. I felt pretty good about everything as a whole. I don't think anything really stood out to me as being bad. Which, I mean, as time goes on, we've talked about this. Any CGI and other, effects can start to look really dated. And I think this holds up pretty good.
This one holds up very well. There's not really any of that. There's some, like I was talking about, some weird or unique shots and editing and angles and splicing and things that happen that are for just artistic and creative effect that we don't see those kind of things anymore, so they feel a little dated. And they feel a little like out of place, but what this movie is and where it came from, it doesn't affect like how it looks necessarily.
I like the way that it's filmed in this kind of indie type
way. So I think the last note that I have is just a random thing. Go back to the tunnel. It's just a random note. I said I've seen enough movies to know for sure that when a whole horde of rats is running in one direction, that there's always something much scarier coming behind that horde.
Yes, absolutely. How many movies have we seen where the rats are the smart ones? It's like, time to get moving, because you know what? They're not the only thing that's coming this way, and we better skedaddle.
But yeah, other than that, done.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have a couple of notes that I haven't talked about in the discussion, so I'll go ahead and share those now. In his early years, Alex Garland found inspiration from the works of George A. Romero, particularly the films Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, two movies that are very near and dear to my heart. As a child, he developed such a fondness for these movies. Even though he eventually moved on from that genre, he kind of forgot about it. His passion was reignited when he played a video game that you may have heard of, Pake, called Resident Evil. Yeah, that really reignited his passion and love for the genre. And, So, Danny Boyle, who had previously directed the film adaptation of Garland's novel The Beach in 2000, admired Garland's screenplay for a proposed film. This admiration further solidified their collaboration, and it laid the foundation for an exciting creative partnership in the realm of the living dead. Certain segments of the film were captured on a Canon XL1 digital video camera. Yes, Canon. That's my brand of camera that I shoot with. I love it. It offered distinct advantages for the production. DV cameras provided a smaller, yet more maneuverable alternative to the traditional film cameras, making them highly practical and efficient for the specific needs of the brief shoots involved in the film. This choice allowed the filmmakers to maintain flexibility and achieve their desired shots without the constraints that larger, bulkier equipment might have imposed. They did have some budget constraints with this movie. At one point, Christopher Eccleston had to take an emergency pay cut. At another juncture, McDonald delivered the news to the crew that the production funds had been depleted. Filming came to a halt, left the closing sequence unfinished. Various alternative ending ideas were proposed, including the original one that involved Jim's death, but it did not resonate well with test audiences. Right. God damn it. Of course it didn't. Fortunately, after witnessing the audience's reaction, studio approved additional funding to film a new ending scene. That is great, because no, I do not want Jim to disappear.
Yeah, my DVD of this movie has the alternate endings on it. I did not watch them, though. For this, I should have.
Don't let it burst your bubble.
Yeah.
Be in the Jim Lives bubble.
Yes, yeah.
So, finally, as everyone knows, 28 Days Later was followed by a sequel in 2007, titled 28 Weeks Later. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland did not return. It focused on a different cast of characters, and one of the stars in that movie was Mr. Jeremy Renner.
Yes. I don't know, I'm not really sure what the, broad public consensus of that movie is as a sequel. I know for me personally, I really love it. Maybe even a little more than this original movie in some cases. So
I've seen it a few times. And it's so funny because since this is the 20th anniversary of the original movie, I read in an article the other day that Cillian Murphy would totally reprise his role if they did a 28 years later sequel. I'm kind of please?
They totally should.
But only if Danny Boyle and Alex Garland come back, because I want it to be a full circle. We need Naomi Harris. We need Megan Burns, who played Hannah. That's what I want. It's got to be real. It's got to be all or nothing.
Yeah. I'd like it. And we will definitely cover 28 Weeks Later sometime. Soon-ish. Doesn't have to be super soon. We can wait another season, or so, but we're not in a rush. But I do want to get to it.
But you guys do know that Pake really wants to continue with Insidious, so...
I know, I don't want to, like, pound it down on you guys too much, but also, Red Door, we mentioned it last week with Insidious 2. We've seen it, and there's access to it, so we could cover it as soon as we wanted to. But we gotta get through the others, so...
Yes, we do.
We'll see how much of a time frame that really takes. Let us know if there's if people are really interested to get to Red Door, or if we can just kind of give that a little more slack. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we can take a slower path to it.
So just let us know. Oh, speaking of letting us know with feedback, perfect timing. The feedback phone ringing. So I have a feeling we might have some good thoughts on this one. Answer that and see.
Sounds good.
All right, and as I expected, we do have some feedback on 28 Days Later this week, which I'm happy with. That's awesome. Do have a few things from some awesome people, so let's go ahead and kick it off. Daphne, will you take the first one?
I will. So Penny says, I love this movie on so many levels. It gave us Cillian Murphy, who has been delighting us ever since, and it's got one of my all-time favorite post-apocalypse scenes, the shopping spree. I think Brendan Gleeson even rides the shopping cart out of the store after joyfully leaving his credit card behind. His later scene with the blood drop in his eye is heartbreaking and why I've been following his career ever since. But mostly, I love this film because it was the source of the first bonding experience in what became one of my most rewarding friendships.
Nice. I love that. This next one comes from Sam. Says, one of my faves. I'd say Jim was more of the typical damsel in distress than the hero. Selena was the badass from start to finish. Frank's character and his relationship with his daughter was so sweet and heartbreaking. That Handmaid's Tale twist with the soldiers was horrifying.
Oh my god. Yes, I didn't think of it that way, but right down to the red dress. Man. I have to disagree, though, about Jim, because I feel like his relentlessness to get back to the house to save the girls was badass.
Yeah, like I said in this episode, he went full John McClane mode by the end.
Yeah, definitely. So Christy says, loved it, scared the hell out of me, but loved it. Excited it's being covered.
Nice. Hope you enjoyed the episode, Christy. And then this last one here comes from Patrick. Says, haven't seen it in years. Saw it at the cinema when it first opened. May have to rewatch it with my soon-to-be 16-year-old daughter. Great birthday gift. Now, where's the DVD?
I know. I think mine is behind me on a shelf because there's a small selection of movies that I make sure are available for me to watch whenever.
Nice.
Well, if you would like to submit feedback like Penny, Sam, Christy, or Patrick, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Run for Your Lives Podcast. You can tweet. Is it still tweeting? Is it Xing? I'm not sure what it is. But you can find us on the app formerly known as Twitter at RFYL Podcast. You can email us, runforyourlivespodcast@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying the show, tell your friends. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty much all the other podcast players, including YouTube. Go to runforyourlivespodcast.com for all the links you'll ever need. And give us a review on Apple Podcasts, as that is the best way to share the love and get us out there even more. We really appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. And speaking of sharing the love, of course, I got to give some shout outs to things going on in the podcast universe around us. My other podcast, Strange Indeed, still on a little hiatus right now after wrapping Black Mirror. We don't know exactly what we're going to do next. If we're going to extend our break, if we're going to jump into something, we will let you know. Keep tabs. But I will go ahead and say, come October 12th, we know exactly where me and Rima are going to be on Strange Indeed. For those who might not see this, so yesterday, if you're listening to this the day this dropped, the teaser trailer and some pictures for Mike Flanagan's final Netflix series, because he has made a move to Amazon Prime. But he's got one more in the can that is releasing on Netflix. Will be the Fall of the House of Usher. And that drops October 12th this year over on Netflix. So yes, Mike Flanagan, you know how much we love him here and how much me and Rima love him over there. I mean, Strange Indeed has covered all of it. Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Midnight Club. It is all over there to check out on Strange Indeed. So of course, with The Fall of Usher coming out, me and Rima are going to be on it. So if we don't know what we're doing before then, definitely know come October 12th. Just a few days after that, there will be an episode out. Me and Rima are covering Fall of the House of Usher because, I'm so excited. Can't wait.
Well, we've covered Mike Flanagan on this podcast as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we covered Hush. We covered Before I Wake. So yeah, we are big Flanagan fans. And there's still a couple Flanagan movies we need to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. We could do Dr. Sleep, but I know that you did it.
We could go to Dr. Sleep. I always love watching and talking about Dr. Sleep. Well, I say always love. I don't always love watching it, even though it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It gets rough. There's definitely some stuff in that movie that's real hard to watch. But in order to talk about it and break it down on a podcast, I might be willing to do it sometime soon. You can hear me and Rima talk about Dr. Sleep over on Strange Indeed. I have covered that movie on a podcast before, but I haven't talked to you about it, so maybe we'll have to do it at some point.
I know.
Maybe we got to do The Shining first. Maybe that's got to be like a...
We do.
Yeah.
We do. He's had a bunch of really good ones, like Oculus is one.
Mm-hmm.
Ouija, Origin of Evil is another one. I don't really want to do Gerald's Game.
No.
Let's not do Gerald's Game.
Gerald's Game is another movie that's incredible. So well done. So impactful. Don't know if I ever want to watch it again just because it is that difficult to watch, even though it's great. There's just some stuff in it that's... chills me to my core. I mean, congratulations, Mike Flanagan. and Stephen King. But yeah.
Yeah. I think there's another one too, Absentia. Is one
that was
we
like
could
his
cover.
first, which I haven't seen all of those. So yeah, plenty of Flaniverse fun that we can have at some point. But yeah, weird tangent to get around to but me and Rima are jumping back into the Flaniverse in October, so stick around for Strange Indeed there. But anyway, so over on Podcastico, there is a new Loki-verse podcast, because Loki Season 2 is coming soon. So that will be there to cover that when it comes out, and you can go ahead and check it out now for their first episode, as the trailer for Loki Season 2 has recently dropped. So they decided to go in and discuss that trailer, discuss kind of thoughts and ideas for what this season might hold, kind of break it down a little bit. You can, again, check out Alex, Kirk, and Sydney over there on the Loki-verse podcast to see what they think about that. I'm excited for Loki, so it should be a great time.
Yeah, me too.
Also, the Revisited podcast. Of course, Ben and Kristen still working their way through that final season of Lost. And they've been doing the Movie Swap podcasts. I don't know if they have one up this week or not. Definitely go check on Wilhelm for that. That's over on Ben's Wilhelm feed. So definitely check that out. Also, speaking of Wilhelm, though, Ben just released a very, very, very important episode to him. I know he has been waiting on, and I know this has been a big one for him. Jason from Podcastica joining him to break down their top 5 Robin Williams films. And if you know Ben, he is just like a huge Robin Williams fan. Everything that man did has just made a huge impact on Ben's life, as he did a lot of people's. And so, yeah, as this kind of being an anniversary thing, Ben making the time to really take this top 5 movie for Robin Williams. So I know that's going to be an incredible episode. Definitely check that out on Wilhelm as well. And then lastly, TV Podcast Industries. Got some good stuff going on in a joint collaboration here with Podcastica. They are going through Good Omens Season 2. I'm going along week to week with them. I'm listening in, and I love listening to the ineffable fiancés, John and Derek, talking about this just incredible show. It's awesome. So yeah, definitely check them out. Covering Good Omens. They're going week to week, even though the whole thing was dropped at once. So episode 3 should be up right now over this weekend. So definitely check that out. I've already watched episode 3. I'm so excited to listen to their coverage of it. It's going to be a good time for sure. And then they are also covering, because TV Podcast Industries does all the things. And they've released like 800 episodes. It's insane.
Oh my God.
And so they're covering all the good stuff. So The Witcher, the back half of season 3 on Netflix right now, they are also going through that as well. So check that out if you're a fan of that. Lots of good podcast stuff to check out. But of course, while you're checking out all of those, we know you want to come back home to mommy and daddy. That's weird. I don't know. What am I? Is that who we are now? But you want to come back home to us right here on Run for Your Lives, because we got something fun for you next week. What is it? Make it less awkward. Go, Daphne.
So in 2018, Suzanne Beyer introduced us to this post-apocalyptic world of Bird Box, which was the movie adaptation of Josh Malerman's 2014 novel of the same name. 5 years later, we visit Barcelona, Spain, to follow a new story based in the same universe. Brothers Alex and David Pastor directed this spin-off that centers on a man trying to get back to his family while learning what it means to do the right thing. Yeah.
That's an interesting little synopsis now that I've seen it. That's clever.
Is it clever?
A little bit. Yeah.
I'll take that as a compliment coming from you.
So, yep, Bird Box Barcelona next week. Like to know what you people think a little bit listening to that one. We covered Bird Box before. This is very unique, creative, different kind of twist on that universe. I'm not going to say much about what I thought about it. You'll have to tune in next week to see. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you haven't checked it out, it's on Netflix. Definitely give it a watch and let us know what you think. I think I'll at least go as far to say I definitely recommend giving it a watch. I'd like to know what people think about that one for sure.
Yeah, and it's been out for a month on Netflix, so you may have already seen it. Please let us know. I gave you all the ways that you can contact us and tell us what you think of this one.
Yep. I think all of our stuff's at podcastica.com as well, if that's even.
It is.
You can find us anywhere on those places.
Anywhere. With that, we've reached the end of another fun, creepy, scary, energetic episode of Run for Your Lives. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And if you have to run, you better run for your lives.
Bye-bye.